Have you ever watched one of those singing competitions like American Idol or The Voice? Have you noticed that the judges have to compare all the different artists against one another? Now, they may use a number of criteria, such as how well do they sing, perhaps their stage presence, maybe how good they dance, or different things such as that. Well, in a similar way, today we're going to be comparing the different kingdoms in ancient Egypt. Now take a look at the lesson question, which is on the screen right now. It says, how do the achievements of ancient kingdoms of Egypt compare to one another? Let's go ahead and get started and answer that lesson question. We're going to start by looking at your lesson goals. Now, we're going to learn about the river valley civilization of ancient Egypt, and we're going to do that in 3 different ways. In the first, we're going to describe how geography affected the development of ancient Egypt. Number 2, we're going to explain the contributions of influential Egyptian pharaohs. And finally, number 3, we're going to identify the key features of the Old, New, and Middle Kingdoms of Egypt. But before we do any of that, let's take a look at your words to know. Now, the green words are your academic words. These are words you'll find throughout your world history course. Those are fertile and dynasty. Now, the purple ones, these are your domain-specific words, or words you'll see specifically in this lesson. And those words are cataract, delta, pharaoh, and theocracy. Be sure to be on the lookout for these various words as we go through this lesson. We're going to start by looking at your lesson goals. Now, we're going to learn about the river valley civilization of ancient Egypt, and we're going to do that in 3 different ways. In the first, we're going to describe how geography affected the development of ancient Egypt. Number 2, we're going to explain the contributions of influential Egyptian pharaohs. And finally, number 3, we're going to identify the key features of the Old, New, and Middle Kingdoms of Egypt. But before we do any of that, let's take a look at your words to know. Now, the green words are your academic words. These are words you'll find throughout your world history course. Those are fertile and dynasty. Now, the purple ones, these are your domain-specific words, or words you'll see specifically in this lesson. And those words are cataract, delta, pharaoh, and theocracy. Be sure to be on the lookout for these various words as we go through this lesson. Before we dive into just specifically looking at the civilizations in ancient Egypt, let's take a broader look at the world as a whole and look at the river valley civilizations. Now, recall that river valleys proved ideal for the growth of agriculture, and that agriculture supported settlements, and then those settlements grew larger and larger into civilizations. And those river valley civilizations were located in Mesopotamia, around the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, around in Southeast Asia, around the Indus River, and in modern-day China, around the Huanghe River. But today, we're going to be focusing on the Nile River, specifically in modern-day Egypt. All right, scholars, let's take a look at that lesson question, which is at the top of the screen. Recall, it says, how do the achievements of the ancient kingdoms of Egypt compare to one another? Well, in this first part of the lesson, we're going to be focusing on the civilization on the Nile River, and especially we're going to be looking at the geography of the key river, which is the Nile. So let's go ahead and get started with this first part. Well, before we talk about the kingdoms in ancient Egypt, it makes sense to talk about the geography of Egypt first. Now, ancient Egyptian civilizations, they surrounded the Nile River, and the Nile was extremely important. Here are just some key things to keep in your mind as we're going through this. One is that the Nile flows from the south to the north. There are highlands or mountains down here in the south, and from there the Nile starts and it flows down toward the north. Also, along the Nile, there are many cataracts or waterfalls that make transportation very hard. Those are notated by these red bars that you can see here. In addition, as the Nile flows, it fans out into a delta near the sea. So toward the Mediterranean Sea up here, the Nile begins to fan out. All right? Finally, Upper Egypt is located in the south, and Lower Egypt is located in the north. Just make sure on those last 2 you just kind of flip your thinking, if you will. Let's keep going and talk about how important the Nile was in ancient Egypt. Now, some of the reasons why the Nile was so important is because it provided a source of food, water, and transportation. It also offered protection from enemies. I want to draw your attention to the picture on the right. This is a picture of the Nile Delta, you can see up here, as well as the Nile River down here. And this is from space. And you can see that the Nile, on each side of the Nile River, there are massive deserts. Now, these deserts offered a great deal of protection because if you're a tribe over here, to get to the Nile River, you had to cross the desert, making it extremely difficult. But also notice how all of the green is focused and all of it is along the Nile River. So you can really see how the Nile really provided that food, that water, and that transportation by using this picture. Well, the Nile was so important in Egypt that it was actually called, Egypt was the gift of the Nile. Now the Nile, it flooded every June, leaving behind a rich layer of soil, that rich alluvial soil, just like in Mesopotamia. And that soil allowed for highly fertile lands to support advanced agriculture. We're going to look at some of those crops in a second. And because it was able to support this agriculture, a wealthy civilization flourished. Now the Nile was so important that a Greek, someone from another country named Herodotus, wrote about it when he said, Egypt is an acquired country. It's the gift of the river. All right, now some of the gifts that the river gave to the Egyptians were some of these crops, where these are some of Egypt's main crops. The first was papyrus, which was used to make paper. That's critical to keep track of writing and to support an advanced civilization. The second were cereals, like wheat and barley. Now these were used to make bread and beer. Beer was especially important in ancient Egypt because it was used to trade and bring more wealth and more prosperity to Egypt. Well, the big thing I want you to remember here is that because of the Nile River allowed for the civilizations in ancient Egypt to flourish because it provided that base of agriculture. That agriculture supported settlements, and those settlements gradually grew larger into the civilizations that we're going to take a look at today. Wonderful work, scholars. You finished the first part of the lesson. Let's take a look at the lesson question, which is at the top of the screen. It says, how do the achievements of the ancient kingdoms of Egypt compare to one another? Now, recall in the first part we talked about civilization on the Nile River and how critical it was to live along the Nile. It was surrounded by deserts on either side, but the Nile River Valley allowed for the surplus of crops which were able to support great civilizations. They also were able to support great kingdoms as well. And that's where we're going to start in this second part, talking about the Old Kingdom. Let's go ahead and get started. We can't start talking about the Old Kingdom without first talking about the rise of King Menes. And the reason we can't start talking about the kingdom is because King Menes, he united the kingdoms of Upper and Lower Egypt around 3100 BCE. And he founded the first Egyptian dynasty. Now, a dynasty are rulers based on families. So, for example, if your great-grandfather was a pharaoh, then your father would be a pharaoh, then you would be a pharaoh, then your son would be a pharaoh. That's what a dynasty is. And in fact, Egyptian history is named in dynasties. They'll talk about the 10th dynasty. But what I want to draw your attention to is to the right, especially this crown here. Now, if you look closely, this crown has two main parts. The first part has this swoop right here. There's this part, and then there's this top part with this little curly thing at the top. But what I want you to see is that this represented one part of Egypt, and this top part represented the other part. So by putting both of these crowns together, into these two crowns into one, it's showing that King Menes had united both Upper and Lower Egypt. And he ruled as the Pharaoh. Let's take a closer look at what the Pharaoh was. You can see a drawing of one to the right. Now, pharaohs in ancient Egypt were all powerful. And the reason being is that one, they were believed to be living gods. And two, they were the head of the religion as well as the head of government. Now, when you're dual-hatted like this, when you're in charge of government and you're in charge of religion, this type of government is referred to as a theocracy. So you can see that at the very beginning of Egyptian history, it began to establish a very complex and centralized government. Well, we just learned that around 3100 BCE, King Menes united Upper and Lower Egypt. Now, the Old Kingdom lasted from about 2660 to about 2180 BCE. About a time period of 500 years. Now, during those 500 years, there were many achievements of the Old Kingdom. One of them was the Great Pyramids, which you can see here. Now, the Great Pyramids really showed an advanced centralized government who were able to organize thousands of laborers to build these pyramids. The second was advanced irrigation, which was a system of basins and locks that brought water to crops further from the Nile. Now, the key takeaway here is that both of these show an advanced central government as well as a huge amount of economic wealth that was in ancient Egypt. Oops. Well, we just learned that around 3100 BCE, King Menes united Upper and Lower Egypt. Now, the Old Kingdom lasted from about 2660 to about 2180 BCE. About a time period of 500 years. Now, during those 500 years, there were many achievements of the Old Kingdom. One of them was the Great Pyramids, which you can see here. Now, the Great Pyramids really showed an advanced centralized government who were able to organize thousands of laborers to build these pyramids. The second was advanced irrigation, which was a system of basins and locks that brought water to crops further from the Nile. Now, the key takeaway here is that both of these show an advanced central government as well as a huge amount of economic wealth that was in ancient Egypt. Oops. Let's begin by looking at the Middle Kingdom by checking out what time it landed on by using, well, obviously, a timeline. Now, the Old Kingdom lasted for about 500 years here. Now, there was about 100 years of weak rulers in ancient Egypt. And from about 280 to about 1640 BCE was the reign of the Middle Kingdom. Now, recall that CA is a Latin abbreviation for circa or around. Now, also recall that when you see this BCE, you are counting down to the year 0. That is why the left number, 2080, is higher than the right number, 1640, because again, you're counting down toward the year 0. Well, you can see that this is when the Middle Kingdom lasted, and during that time period, there were a number of achievements of that Middle Kingdom. It was extremely prosperous, and one of the reasons why it was so prosperous is because the Egyptians built a canal to the Red Sea. This improved trade as well as transportation, where before, if you were a trader with some goods, you could come up the Red Sea and you would stop right here. Let's say you wanted to get right over here along the delta. Well, once you stopped here, you would have to unload all your goods, maybe get some camels and some wagons, and then you would have to cross the Sinai Desert, reload your goods in the Mediterranean Sea, and then sail them over here. Well, this canal linked about right here. So for now, you could bring your goods right here, get on this canal, come to the Nile River, and then just sail up the Nile River. So obviously that would improve trade and transportation. However, even with these great achievements, the Middle Kingdom gradually went in decline because it fell to invaders. These invaders were Asian nomads called Hyksos, and they attacked with wheeled chariots. You can see these wheeled chariots to the right of the screen. Now, the Hyksos, they ruled Egypt from 1640 to 1570 BCE. But the big takeaway here is that the Middle Kingdom was an advanced civilization and a very advanced kingdom, because by building that canal, you could see they had to have a strong centralized government to get all those workers to build that canal. This timeline does a really great job of showing when the New Kingdom came about. Now, looking at the timeline, can you spot it? Well, it's not the Old Kingdom, it's definitely not the Middle, so that only leaves the New Kingdom, which came about after they were able to kick out the Hyksos, who had been ruling in Egypt for the years prior to the reign of the New Kingdom. This map right here can really show you the extent of the Egyptian Empire under the New Kingdom, where it goes all the way down here into southern Egypt, but it also goes into Mesopotamia as well. And they're able to do this because a permanent army was established and it used advanced bronze weaponry. And you may say, bronze, who cares if it's bronze or if it's steel? Well, think, if their weapons, if this bronze is stronger than the weapons being used in this area or this area, that means that when the Egyptians would fight those other people's weapons would actually break because bronze weaponry was stronger. So their military was stronger. And it also, by doing this conquest allowed it to increase trade. So now, if you were living in Thebes, you could trade with this part of the empire, this part of the empire, this part of the empire, and bring all these different trade goods through these different cities. And this led to increased prosperity. And this prosperity allowed for new temples and new building projects to take place. In regards to the trade, people traded a number of goods, including ivory, gold, wood, and cattle between all these different locations. Now, one major pharaoh during this time period was Queen Hatshepsut. And you may say, wait, I thought pharaohs were male. Well, that's not always true, because Queen Hatshepsut obviously was a female. And she was, in fact, extremely powerful, and she ruled for her young stepson, Tutmosis III. If you take a look over here, you'll notice that, remember how I told you that most of the pharaohs were male? Well, if you look at this, you can see that Queen Hatshepsut, even though she is a female, she wore the traditional head garb of the male pharaohs. That really helped her gain greater respect in Egypt. And with that, remember, we already talked about how she encouraged trade. And during the New Kingdom, there is a period of greater trade and a period of greater prosperity. In addition to the achievements of the New Kingdom that we just looked at, there was a number of monuments as well that were built during this time period. Now, pharaohs of the New Kingdom also, they wanted to construct these massive monuments, and many of these are located in the Valley of the Kings. Let's take a look at this one right here, which was built by the pharaoh named Ramses II in honor of him and his wife. These are massive stone carvings. Now, what I really want you to focus on is that these stone carvings were done by hand. There was no backhoe, there was no construction equipment that we see nowadays at a modern-day construction site. All by hand and all by muscle was how these rocks were dug into and how they were moved away. And this really showed the power, these monuments did, of the New Kingdom. And it also showed how centralized their government was, because thousands of people had to be contracted or forced to build these large monuments. However, not all kings were as good or as effective as Ramses II. And because of this, the New Kingdom began to decline. Now, this New Kingdom, they faced threats from invasion beginning around 1200 BCE. And the Egyptian dynasties, they began to weaken, and independent kingdoms were formed. Instead of just having one core dynasty, many different ones were formed as well. And by 1751, the kingdom of Kush, which was in Upper Egypt, in southern parts of Egypt, had conquered the Egyptian lands. Now, I want to do a strategy of comparing and contrasting. Now, on here, it may look like a lot of information, but I don't want you to become overwhelmed. Now, what I want to show you is that each of the kingdoms has its own set of boxes, obviously old, middle, new. And this is an excellent way that you can compare and contrast. What are we doing? Well, we're comparing the different kingdoms, but we're comparing two different things about each: their achievements and the cause of decline. So obviously in this top box, these are the achievements of the different kingdoms, and the lower box has the causes of decline. So let's just focus on a few of them. We're not going to go through all of them, but for example, in achievements. All right, going to the Old Kingdom, they built great monuments. In addition to that, they were the first theocracies. But what we're doing when we're comparing and contrasting, look at this. The Old Kingdom built great monuments, just like the New Kingdom. So you found how those two were similar. Jumping down to the causes of decline, this was the Pharaoh's loss of power. And in addition, the new kingdom, also a reason for their decline, was the Pharaoh's loss of power. So what I want you to see is that by using a graphic organizer, just like this one on the screen, it really allows you to compare and contrast the different kingdoms in ancient Egypt. Let's finish up by looking at Egypt on a timeline, where you can obviously see the three large time periods of the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom. But let's take a step back and look at ancient Egypt in comparison to other empires in the similar region. Again, you have the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom. But go to the bottom of the timeline, and you'll see that during the Middle Kingdom, the Babylonian Empire was in existence, and during the New Kingdom, the Assyrian Empire was in existence. But the main common theme between the Babylonians, the Middle Kingdom, the New Kingdom, and the Assyrians, and all of these, is that they all existed along a river. Whether that be in Babylonia and Assyrian empires, they existed along the Tigris and the Euphrates, and the Middle, New, and Old Kingdoms, they existed along the Nile River.